Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in our chats with Emily as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Thomas H. Johnson edition of the poems of Emily Dickinson, and we turn now to poem 732. She rose to his requirement, dropped. Now, one scholar has pointed out that it's hard to read that first line and it to be metrically smooth. This is, one scholar has called it, one of Emily's most haunting poems. In many ways, we're back to our earlier studies, guys. You'll remember in 199, I'm wife. I finished that other state. I'm czar, I'm woman now, it's safer so. How odd the girl's life looks behind this soft eclipse. I think that earth feels so to folks in heaven now. This being comfort then, that other kind was pain. Why compare? I'm wife. Stop there. Maybe you'll remember when we did 461. A wife at daybreak I shall be. Sunrise, hast thou a flag for me? At midnight I am but a maid. How short it takes to make a bride. Then midnight I passed from thee unto the east in victory. Midnight, good night. I hear them call, the angels bustle in the hall softly. My furniture climbs the stair. I fumble at my childhood's prayer. So soon to be a child no more. Eternity, I'm coming, sir, Savior. I've seen the face before. When this poem was published in 1890, it was actually titled The Wife. Of course, Emily never titling any of her poems. It is another study of social tension, no question, in our Big Five as we talk about it in our assumptions. I think you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, chats with Emily, so I'll play this. I'm hopeful that you've worked through our set of introductory comments where we mention our Big Five. That is to say, what does this text say about epistemology, what you can know, ontology, who you are, psychology, the study of the individual mind, sociology, the study of the collective mind, and then finally the question of theodicy, why must there be pain and suffering in the world? And this poem addresses all of those, but specifically sociology and theodicy. The question of what is the sacrifices that are required for a woman of Emily's time to be a wife. And notice I say for Emily's time because this is a poem by Emily Dickinson. Much has been made, of course, of this poem as being Emily's critique on marriage and the sacrifices that must be made by wives in through the process of marriage. For Emily, what makes this poem so fascinating is that she never married. She never engaged even apparently in much discussion about marriage with one or two rare exceptions. And because of that, we'll place this poem within the broader context of the other poems that we've already worked with. I'm hopeful that you've been following our stuff and we've worked through poem 730 up through 731. We just finished with 731. I want it pleaded all its life. If you've done this study with us, you should be able, as we saw in 199 and 461, you'll see connections to many of the other poems, and we'll hit a couple of more as well. 1072 and 1737 we'll share in this. Now, there are different arguments as to who Emily's referencing as in regards to being a wife. The scholar Paula Bennett thinks that maybe this is Emily's gesturing towards her own mother. Leiter calls this unspoken disillusionment and in fact indicts the Victorian marriage as a trap, as Leitner will call it, a trap that deprives a wife of selfhood. Another scholar has pointed out that this poem is a psychological study of the three stages in the life of a Victorian married woman. And I think that's a fascinating way to read it as well. She rose to his requirement, dropped the playthings of her life to take the honorable work of woman and of wife. If aught she missed in her new day of amplitude or awe, or first perspective, or the goal in using wear away, it lay unmentioned as the sea developed pearl and weed, but only to himself be known the phantoms, they abide. Now, I'm sorry, I said phantoms and I should have said fathoms, and I apologize. I think Emily is doing something intentional with the word fathoms, the depth that she's playing with, and we'll come back to the word. Notice we begin with rising. In other words, there is an understanding here in this poem that for Emily, the view is the wife must rise to the requirements of her husband, right? She rose to his requirement. By the way, notice it's not requirements, but rather requirement, right? In other words, there is a standard that's expected, she says, and she rose to it. Now, who the she of the poem is, the wife of the poem is, as we said, we don't know. And then notice the use of the dash and then the word dropped. Some have seen this as one of the key words of the poem, which goes with the word develop later in the poem. The playthings of her life. Now, the scholar Leiter has argued that Emily once said or wrote, "Blessed be those who play, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Emily is a player, and you'll remember at in poem 320, we play at pace. Emily loves to play. 74 of her poems, she references play. As we've commented so much, and we can borrow from our study of Wittgenstein and language play here, she loves to play. And so Emily here is saying that a wife who takes up this rising challenge, this requirement, will have to give away or stop the playthings of her life. Notice her capitalized. To take what? Well, the honorable work of woman and of wife. Now, wife is mentioned in 13 poems. We saw the word in 154. We saw it in 187. Of course, we read 199. We saw it in 219. We saw it in 230. We as well read 461. We saw it in 589. We saw it in 605. We saw it in 640. We will see it again in 961. We'll see it when we get to 1072. And this is the way she'll play with it then. Title divine is mine. This is one of her most famous poems. The wife without the sign. Acute degree conferred on me, Empress of Calvary. Royal all but the crown, betrothed without the swoon. God sends us women when you hold garnet to garnet, gold to gold. Born bridal, shrouded in a day. Try victory. My husband, women say, stroking the melody. Is this the way? By the way, we'll come back to this use of the word gold in this poem as well. When we get to 1737, she says it this way. Rearrange a wife's affection when they dislocate my brain. Amputate my freckled bosom. Make me bearded like a man. Blush my spirit in thy fastness, blush my unacknowledged clay. 7 years of troth have taught thee more than wifehood ever may. Love that never leaped in socket, trust entrenched in narrow pain, constancy through fire awarded, anguish bare of anodyne. Burden borne so far triumphant, none suspect me of the crown, for I wear the thorns till sunset, then my diadem put on. Big my secret, but it's bandaged, it will never get away till the day its weary keeper leads it through the grave to thee. We'll enjoy, when we hit that poem, 1737, we'll enjoy coming back to remind ourselves of this poem. That is to say, she says, the woman rose to the requirements, put away the playthings, and decided to take on the honorable work of woman and wife. Now, the question always when we're studying Emily is, does she mean the word honorable legitimately or ironically? Notice she continues, if aught, as in anything she missed in her new day, notice day capitalized, of amplitude or awe. Amplitude, the idea of a wider space, of awe, the idea of the sublime, or first perspective, dash, or the gold, again, we're back to our study of 1072 when it comes, in using wear away. The idea, of course, of the gold, and many have pointed this out, the gold ring that will be placed on her finger begins to thin over time. In other words, the second stanza argues that once the decision is made, the first stage of the wife's dilemma, the second stage is there's things that don't get done. There's experiences that don't get had, she says, and there's amplitude and there's awe, and there's perspective that just does not happen. It lays unmentioned. Again, we're back to the use of the word dropped, right? And then an interesting simile. As the sea developed pearl and weed. Of course, pearl might be representative of talent. Weed, maybe the domestication and housework that's attuned, always going to be attendant to the Victorian wife of Emily's day. I think develop is the key word of the poem, though, because this is the real tension. Emily says, this, whoever this she is, right, this wife, that there were things she had to give up to be able to do the honorable work. Again, how you define that one word honorable in this poem will define everything that you think Emily is saying about this. But the only things that happen are really to the sea himself be known, the fathoms they abide. But why? Because everything is hidden in so many ways. What it is that a wife for Emily has to go through to be the wife that she is expected to be, something Emily herself never did. At 2a, I think the message here is that for Emily's perspective, that married life and the life of a wife was not for Emily. She apparently never saw herself playing that role. Or if she did see herself a wife, she saw herself wedded to her mission, which is of course to create these amazing poems. And to be, well, it's obviously the question is, whose marriage is she studying and looking at to try and understand? At 3A, well, we of course will come back to 1072 and 1737 as studies. But I can't help but think of Ibsen's Dollhouse here, published in 1879, which will play very similar kinds of games. Obviously, we think of Gilman's Yellow Wallpaper, we think of Chopin's Story of an Hour, and any number of other titles that come to mind that play with very similar themes. Finally, at 3B, to own a poem like this, you guys, of course, are not married yet, and yet there is a fair question to ask. What are your thoughts about becoming a wife or a husband and the sacrifices that have to be incurred for that experience? And is that something for you? Thank you.